and welcome to the Intel Brief. Today is Wednesday, 5 February. I'm your host Daniel, and today we'll be covering US military plane flies back deported immigrants to India, Trump suggests US ownership of Gaza during a Netanyahu visit, and Zelenskyy puts the Ukrainian war dead at over 45,000. So firstly, a US military plane carrying 104 deported Indian migrants has arrived in India, marking the first batch of deportees since Donald Trump's strict immigration policies were introduced. The deported individuals had entered the US illegally over the last few years. Indian officials have confirmed that they have no objection to accepting verified Indian nationals living unlawfully abroad, as the government opposes illegal immigration due to its links with organised crime. New Delhi has maintained its stance against unlawful migration while cooperating with US on deportation matters. The deportations have come just ahead of Indian Prime Minister Modi's scheduled visit to Washington, where immigration is expected to be among key discussion points with Trump. During a recent phone call, Trump emphasized the importance of India's increasing purchases of American security equipment and ensuring fair trade relations. The Pew Research Center estimates that around 725,000 Indian nationals are illegally residing in the US as of 2022, and more deportations are anticipated. So what? If the US plans to deport even half of the illegal migrants in their country, it is going to be a monumental effort. While the majority of Americans are somewhat in favor of this move, it is likely to be more popular if they use a structured approach where the deportations start with the most violent criminals and work their way down. Regardless, though, this is likely going to be an extremely expensive undertaking, and one that will likely become more unpopular as the costs get passed on to regular Americans. And next, during a press conference alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump suggested that the US could take control of the Gaza Strip, describing it as a long-term ownership proposition. He stated that Washington would be responsible for dismantling unexploded ordnance and developing the area, with potential assistance from Saudi Arabia. Trump also reiterated that the US had not yet decided on recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the occupied West Bank, but hinted at an upcoming announcement. Additionally, he expressed a willingness to negotiate with Iran, but emphasized that Tehran would not be allowed to develop nuclear weapons. Netanyahu in turn praised Trump's as Israel's greatest friend and the White House, and expressed confidence in the possibility of a peace deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Trump further suggested that resettling Palestinians from Gaza to another location, stating that they might not wish to return to what he called a demolition site. This idea, however, was met with strong opposition from Saudi Arabia, which reaffirmed their commitment to establishing an independent Palestinian state within East Jerusalem as its capital, and rejected any forced displacement of Palestinians. Meanwhile, Netanyahu has announced plans to send another delegation to Qatar to continue ceasefire negotiations with Hamas, mediated by the US, Egypt, and Qatar. The discussions aim to facilitate the release of the remaining Israeli hostages and establish steps towards ending the conflict that erupted following the October 7th massacres. So what? Though Trump did not provide details on what he meant by owning the Gaza Strip, this move appears highly unpopular with international leaders. It is possible that he meant that US troops would move into the area and provide security, while US construction companies would rebuild the area for the Palestinian people. Or he could have literally meant the US will assume control and governance of the area, but that would be a bit crazy. Regardless, both plans are unlikely to be accepted by Hamas or the majority of the population living there, and could lead to US troops coming into direct confrontation with Hamas militants. This also goes against Trump's moves to remove US troops from conflicts in the Middle East. But who really knows? Going to have to wait and see what happens with this one. And lastly, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has announced that 45,100 Ukrainian soldiers have died and 390,000 have been injured since Russia's full-scale invasion began in February 2022. As the war nears its third anniversary and remains a stalemate, Zelenskyy expressed willingness to engage in direct talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin if it could lead to peace without further loss of life. However, he emphasized that such negotiations would require the involvement of the United States and Europe alongside Ukraine and Russia. Despite rejecting any recognition of Russian-occupied territories, he admitted that Western military support had not been sufficient to force Russian troops out. Zelenskyy also estimated that Russian losses are over 350,000 dead and up to 700,000 injured or missing, though all of these figures remain unverified. Zelensky's remarks come as Donald Trump returns to office, having pledged to end the war quickly, though his strategy remains unclear. So far, Trump has fluctuated between suggesting that he may cut military aid to Ukraine, but also threatening Russia that he may increase military aid and sanctions against Russia. Zelenskyy has warned against the lifting of sanctions, arguing that doing so would heighten the risk of further Russian attacks. As diplomatic discussions continue, the uncertainty surrounding Trump's approach to Ukraine adds another layer of complexity to this conflict. So what? While it is highly likely that Zelenskyy is underestimating the casualty figures here, it is unlikely that being honest would support their war effort. It seems likely that the most effective path to peace in Ukraine is to cripple the Russian economy and make it difficult for Russia to continue the conflict. Trump has already hinted that this is likely his plan through increased sanctions and improved import controls on Russia. Thank you for tuning in to the Intel Brief, your daily update on global geopolitics, brought to you by HM Intelligence. You can support the show by sharing it with your friends and leaving us a 5-star review. If you're curious to learn more about intelligence, you could check out one of our courses in the description below. Thank you for listening. I've been your host, Daniel, and I'll see you next time.